Hey everyone, Lucas here. As some of you may know, I run the DBC Natural Health YouTube channel. I'm also involved with a whole bunch of other things that we do at DBC. And today I'm going to show you how, walk you through a autumn stew recipe that that I made up the other day. I think it turned out really well. But first I have a brief PSA just about the YouTube channel and where we're going with that. I'm trying to expand into a few different sorts of videos that we can offer to our audience and to the patients that come into DBC that show things about healthy living, how to exercise, how to make healthy food, where to find it, things like that. I know a lot of you come here just for the monthly seminars that we do where Dr. Denbour or one of the other doctors presents topics in depth. Those aren't going away. We're going to keep on releasing those once every month. And if you're just coming here for that, I make them easy to find because they have a standardized sort of thumbnail so that you can just easily pinpoint those in our library. I also set up a playlist that has all of the seminars in it, so you can just go to that from our channel's main page and you'll just see only the seminars there. That said, today I decided to take us into my kitchen here and try to recreate this recipe that I made up on the fly just with a bunch of autumn type ingredients that I found lying around. I decided to present this recipe specifically because, first of all, it's seasonal. We're entering peak color here in West Michigan right now. And secondly, it has a whole bunch of different basic kitchen skills that I can demonstrate while making it. So if you're interested in following along with the recipe or making something kind of like it, or if you just want to learn some of the basic things about how I operate in the kitchen and how you can quickly throw a meal together, well, come along for the ride. All right, gonna need a pot of reasonable size, a pan to saute in, a few basic utensils. I don't have a fancy kitchen here, really. It's pretty basic stuff for the most part. So I don't think anybody's going to have to go out and buy a whole bunch of interesting things. The basis of this stew is a bunch of different autumn vegetables that I found around, like this butternut squash that I actually got from our health coach, Dawn. So thank you, Dawn. Carrots, onion, apples, and some pork loin chops. These I actually got from my friend Todd Gurink, who runs a farm called Mid-Mitten Farm around Mount Pleasant. And he raises them all in pasture, gives them a little bit of non-GMO feed, and then about this time of year he puts them out into the woods to scavenge for acorns. So it's all very high quality stuff. I trust the quality of this meat completely. It's difficult to find good quality pork, so I don't tend to use it too much, but when we get part of a pig from him, then we're set that way for a while. If you want to find good quality pork around here, you can go to Mid-Mitten Farm. He only slaughters pigs once a year and you need to buy at least a half pig, so I know that's not for everyone. It is the very best quality that I know of around here, but I know that S&S Lamb Company sometimes does things with pigs, and Crane Dan's Farm, you might be able to find some pretty well-raised pigs as well. They both sell meat at the Fulton Street Farmers Market. So if you want to find a good source for pork around here, that's where I would go with it. You can't usually find stuff that's even organic, much less pasture raised in the grocery stores. So it's one of those circumstances where if you can't find a good quality pork, I might just go with a different meat instead. All right, I'm just going to let the meat thaw here by submerging it in hot water. Just put something on top of it to keep it under the surface. And I just took it out this morning, so it's still a little bit frozen, and so that should be ready by the time we need it. Next, I'm going to get cutting some onions here. So it's just I have two medium-ish yellow onions. I just got them at the farmer's market. And I just lop both of the ends off with a large knife like this. So it's like that, and then I cut it in half, like so. And then it's really easy to just grab the edges like that and pull off the exterior. Just like so. Trash is right next to me so I can get rid of that waste immediately. Then I take it face down like this, and might be a little bit difficult for you to see here. I'll angle it this way. Make cuts this way. I'm cutting this a little bit more coarsely than I would because I want there to be kind of large-ish pieces of onion in there. So we're talking, maybe 2/3 of an inch thick here, whereas usually I would cut it quite a bit thinner than that and then cut it this way also. in order to cut it up into tiny little squares to mince it. We'll just start these right off because I want them to be kind of pretty well seared. Add a little bit of maybe 2 tablespoons worth of avocado oil. I like avocado oil because it doesn't burn very quickly. Whenever you burn a food so that it's blackening or so that an oil is smoking, it's creating carcinogenic compounds. And so I'm not going to say you can't ever have food that's been cooked on a grill or anything like that, but you want to avoid it as much as possible. We'll let that heat up just for a second and then throw the onion in. All right, let me stir this up here. See, I'm sort of striking the pieces to break them up into their constituent parts so that they all cook evenly in there. I tend to use wooden utensils because they don't scratch the inside of the pans as much. And unlike plastic, there's no leaching off or melting that can happen. All right, you can see it's fresh from the field. It still has a bit of dirt on it. This part is a little bit more difficult. So if you don't have a lot of arm or upper body strength or don't have very good knives, you might not want to try this. It's perfectly fine to just get squash that's been pre-cubed in the store. I of course prefer to get higher quality stuff, but it'll do in a pinch because this takes a fair amount of force and sort of driving it in there and then using a twisting motion to keep the cut driving along there. For the butternut squash, you want to remove the top like this. You're going to use all of that, and then this bulbous part of the bottom here you cut in half because in there is the pulp and the seeds, and you need to scoop that out with a spoon. All right, got a spoon here. Watch out for the knife. And just sort of cut across there. Get rid of that. You can see it, like I got most of it just in one go, but you just sort of like scrape it like this until you just have clear flesh. Like so. You could hypothetically keep the seeds and roast them, but you have to clean them off and everything first, and it's a bit of a hassle. All right. Just lop off the stem here and just use the back of the knife. Break that off. And then we're going to take a peeler and peel that up. So I'm just going to give this an occasional stir. Occasional because I want a little bit of, you can see how like we're getting a little bit of brown development on there. That adds quite a bit of flavor to the dish, so I'm trying to get a little bit of that going on. If I were to stir it continuously, then you wouldn't get that as quickly. So just using a normal vegetable peeler, I get all the peel off of there, working away from my hands so I don't get myself. It's a little bit tougher than peeling like a potato or an apple or something like that. Again, if you don't have a lot of hand strength or aren't too handy with a knife in the kitchen, maybe you'd be better off skipping this step and just buying a bag of cubed squash from the store. Right, you can see there's sort of like green veins right underneath the surface there. If I were to keep on peeling down, those would go away, but they don't really hurt anything. So we're just getting straight squash there, but that would be quite a bit of extra effort, and they don't really alter the flavor much. There we go. Got a pretty good browning on that now, so I'm going to turn that off for now. Now you notice this is a pretty good knife. It's kind Calphalon katana. It's one of the most important things in the, to have in the kitchen is a good quality knife, so I think that spending a bit more on that is worthwhile. Most of the knives I have are just really cheap KitchenAid stuff, but the one that I use the most is this one and a small paring knife, so I spent a bit more money and got a better version of those. Well, now that we got all the peel off, we can just get this into cubes. This part is quite a bit easier. Sort of try to keep it all together there so you can do it all in one shot like this. Right. All right. We're going to do that to the rest of it too, and you see they aren't like perfect cubes or anything like that, but we have sort of bite-sized pieces of squash there. This is probably actually, this squash is going to give us more than we need just for this recipe. Like that, what I made right there was probably enough for this, so we'll have extra. See, I'm sort of using my hand to keep this together. Just need to be careful not to stab yourself back there, so your hand needs to be high enough up like this. And here's another thing a lot of people don't know. You can get more stability on the knife if you hold it like this, right around the blade. Call that a claw grip, I believe, instead of just holding it by the handle like this, which works better in some circumstances, but when I'm trying to do more heavy-duty cutting, I'll hold it like this so that I have a better grip on the whole operation. There's the top of it. Cut that down the middle so we have a stable surface that's not going to roll over. And we'll just cut it lengthwise like so. And like so. Just going to go and put this in a bowl. There we go. I don't really bother to, if I know where the carrots have come from and I know there's no pesticides or anything on them, I'll just, we'll scrub them off in the sink, and I've done that already. So they're pretty clean already, and I'll just use them from there. That way you can avoid having to peel them. Line these up first and get rid of the ends. And just sort of tap them so they're even and lop the ends off. Okay. And I'll cut these narrow little bits off here. Then, again, you want to be kind of careful with this. I sort of hold it like that and down. And you have like a thinner bit of carrot there. Whereas for these bits, I'm going to go a little bit shorter here. For these bits, you're going to want to cut it in half like that. And then do it again for this, making a sort of... And I just think this, you can just cut the carrot up into pieces, but I think this looks better in this stew. Makes it look a little more festive. Or rustic, or what have you. All right, there's that. See, nice autumn colored vegetables there. This is just like about a double handful. That's about what we're gonna use for that. All right, now I'm cutting up some garlic here as the final vegetable that goes in this whole mix. Just take a good head of, I prefer hard-neck garlic just because it has such large cloves like this. So it's pretty easy to portion up and cut into pieces. So how I go about that is actually kind of similar to how I would cut an onion. I'd probably do it differently if it's just like the store-bought garlic that comes in tiny cloves. But since this is so large, you can just sort of cut the top and bottom off, cut it like that again, and then just use the edges to get the external papery membrane off. And if it's being stubborn, you can actually take a knife like this, put it on there, and just smack it like that. It partially crushes the garlic, and it frees the external shell off of it. No need to mince it. It's going to cook for a while, and it'll become just sort of like a mild savory touch to the back of it after all is said and done. All right, now we got the onions browned pretty well. We're going to add the other vegetables to it. Carrots, about 2 cups worth of the squash. So maybe a heaping double handful. See, it's a good handful of garlic here. Throw that in with the rest. Stir that up well. And that's all gonna stir fry for just a little while. You don't want the onions to burn. Since they're already partially cooked, I'm just starting to get the flavors to melt together and maybe get a little bit of a sear on some of the carrots and so on. All right, we're gonna do something a little unorthodox here. We're gonna add some bacon. Now, this is bacon from a very healthy, happy pig, so it's quite a bit different from the stuff you get in the stores. Even so, it's probably not the very healthiest thing to have every day, but if you just have small amounts of high quality stuff from time to time, it's not going to be that bad for you. And in fact, it does actually have some health properties like some pretty good oils. When you pasture raise an animal, it's eating a lot more plants and grass and leaves and things like that, and so it actually starts forming omega-3 fatty acids in its fat tissue instead of just omega-6s like if you only feed it grain. So it actually becomes quite a bit healthier from just getting a good oils in your diet sort of perspective. So we're going to take, I just have like a bunch of odds and ends pieces of bacon here, little bits of it that didn't form into nice long strips. And I'm going to just get a handful of that and cut it up into little pieces. If you're just using stuff that you get from the store, probably about 3 or 4 slices worth is what I'm doing here. All right, so we're going to take these bacon ends I had here. I grabbed like I say maybe 3 or 4 slices worth. I'm going to cut it up into little pieces. Again, just so that you don't run into big pieces of bacon in the middle of the soup there. And I'm going to take all of that and just throw it in the pan, which I have set to a medium-low sort of heat. I find that if you cook bacon at too high a heat, it just doesn't develop the same amount of flavor, and you also tend to develop more of those advanced glycosylated end products, which are the sort of compounds that you get on the outside of meat when you burn it and or when you deep fry things, and it's just kind of a pro-cancerous type of compound. So obviously bacon isn't health food. I don't advise you eat it every day, but as with a lot of things, if you just have it every once in a while, your body is able to detoxify and clear it pretty well. And in cases like this, we're missing a lot of the hormones and pesticides and other toxic sorts of things that you might find in conventionally raised pork. Pretty much anything that you can eat, you can overdo. Right? Some things you can have more of, some things you can have less of. Like if you were to eat several pounds of broccoli a day, there are actually some compounds in broccoli that would begin to bioaccumulate in the body that are harmful. And but at a level below that, it's not harmful at all. And the same is true of some of these things like grilled meats or fried foods and stuff like that. Very small amounts of it aren't good for you, but your body is able to clear it. And so you can have them every once in a while. There are a few things that you should never have, like heavy metals, lead, PBA and plastics and stuff like that, but for the most part, if you're just prudent about how often you have these things, then every once in a while it's all right. If you're in the middle of a detoxification process, it's probably best to avoid these things entirely, just to give your liver the best chance it has of getting healthy again. But if you're in a healthy state, a little bit of meat, occasional, I wouldn't say fried foods are ever good for you, but like bacon like we're doing here, if it's from a good source, even like occasional exposure to, say for instance, you're at a place where the only water you have is bottled, there's going to be PBA in it. It's not going to be the very best for you, but your liver is going to be able to take care of it. If you do it every day, then it starts to become a little bit more of a problem. All right, this is looking pretty done here. So I'm going to take that right off. Now we're just going to throw that right in the soup as it's still simmering. It goes right in with all the vegetables, just so that it starts developing all the flavor. Now see, when I'm doing this, I'm sort of catching all the grease in the bottom of the pan there and just sort of flicking up the bacon itself. I want to save the grease for the next thing that we're going to do. All right, once that's stirred fried a bit, we're just going to put some vegetable stock in there. I'm just going to use something from a box. It's organic, all natural stuff. Ideally, you'd make your own, but I mean, how far do you want to take these things? So I'm busy editing this video here, and I noticed that I forgot to film myself heading in the spices. So let me just speak a quick word about that. What we want to do is add 2 whole cloves. You see those ones right there, and an entire star anise. Just throw that right in there at the beginning of boiling it along with the stock, and just leave that in and take them out at the end. Those spices are going to add a little bit of warm sort of fall character, almost kind of like adding mulling spices to it, but they also work really well just with these savory dishes. In fact, I'll oftentimes grind up a star anise and put it on a steak along with black pepper. Just helps to bring the meat flavors together really well. So that's how this stew is spiced. You just add the cloves and the star anise in there. You take them out at the end because you don't want somebody to bite down into an entire clove. That would be not harmful, but maybe a little bit too flavorful. And that's about that. All right, you might have been asking yourself when the apples were going to come in. Well, that comes next. We're actually going to peel and slice these and put them in the bacon grease and sort of caramelize the sugars on the outside that way. That just opens up some of the flavors, gives it a bit more savoriness. Again, not something that I think you should probably do every day. Because apples have a lot of sugar, and here you are frying them in bacon grease. But all the ingredients, you know, this is local, this is organic. The bacon is pasture raised. I know exactly where that came from. And we're also not going to bring it to the point of burning. So, so far as these things go, again, maybe not something to do every day, but it adds a lot of excellent flavor to this dish. And I'm going to show you first off how to prepare the apples, just in case you don't know how to cut up an apple. And then show you about what I'm looking for when I go about cooking it. So to peel it, I just take a peeler, sort of set it against the top there, and then I kind of rotate it like this, just to get the closest peel around the top that I can. So you end up getting this sort of almost disc from the top there. And then from there, just spiral around the entire apple. I move the apple instead of the peeler because it gives you better control so that you don't cut your fingers. And see, it just sort of keeps on feeding through until you've gotten rid of all of it. When I'm just eating an apple, of course, I won't peel it. You're taking away a lot of the good fibers by doing that. But when you're putting this into a stew or something like that, you don't want little pieces of peel in it. So there we are. It just drops right down in the trash there. Kind of do the same thing on this side to get it as close to the core as possible. See a good long string there. Once you get good at it, you can get it pretty efficient that way. And then we repeat with the next one. And yeah, if you have smaller apples, you might want to use 3 of them. I'm using 2 of them because these are somewhat bigger, well, maybe medium-sized ones. You can kind of go up or down depending on what your tastes are. So I take a paring knife, goes right in half, then into quarters, like so. Now these, I kind of, see there's a little bit of peel there yet, so I kind of like angle it up like that and just peel it, the rest of it like that, before I go into cutting it downwards and then repeating on the other side, like that, so that you have a quarter right there. You want to make sure you get all the core out because the hard little pieces in there will interfere with the texture of the stew also. There we go. Now these I just want to cut up into slices, maybe about 4 per quarter, so they're, you know, like kind of medium-sized slices. You don't want them too thin because then it'll get mushy and you're just going to be basically adding applesauce to the stew. We want them to stay whole, and that's why I'm not throwing these just straight in the stew. We're going to sort of sear the outside of them and then add them right at the end along with the pork loin so that it doesn't overcook. There we are. Now we're going to go back over to the pan here. It's still pretty warm, has that bacon grease in it. I'm going to turn that onto a high heat because I want to just sear the outside of the apples, get the sugars opening up and caramelizing just a bit to add some flavor to it without cooking the entire apple. All right, this is getting pretty hot right there. You don't want it to start smoking. That produces those advanced glycosylated end products I was talking about earlier. You can see we're using the same pan for a whole bunch of different things. We're going to use the same pan for the pork chops again. Reduces the dishes you can do. It's going to be a few minutes on each side there. All right, this is starting to smell pretty good. You can see as I turn them here that they're starting to get a little bit of a, you could call it a caramelization reaction that just brings out a lot of flavor in the apple right there. Technically, and here's the nerd in me coming out. Technically, that's called a Maillard reaction, not a caramelization reaction, but that's a different story. All right, that's looking pretty good. We'll take that right off and put it on a plate to be added back in right at the end there. I'm going to show you how to sear a pork loin front and back. And this can be used if you're just serving it by itself. You can do the same thing with steak. Not so much with, say, chicken or anything like that. Maybe I'll make a video about that some other time. But this will show you the basics idea of how to pan sear a piece of meat like this to get it ready to have by itself or to go into a stew like what we're doing. So I've got 4 pork chops here. It was probably about 1.5 pounds worth. You could easily get away with just using a pound of them. I just used it like that because that's the size of the package that it came in for me. And I didn't want to just have one raw pork chop sitting in my fridge. So I just did all of them. You could easily do smaller ones that weigh up to a pound, or just 3 of them or something like that. The pork just adds a little bit of complexity, a little bit of richness to the dish, but really the central part of it is the spices and the vegetables and all those other things that we did before. So you can see that 2 of them here are already rubbed. There's like salt and pepper on them. And the way you do that, I just take my salt cellar here. I have like a finely ground sea salt. Just take a pinch of that and sprinkle it over it. You're going to use about 2 teaspoons front and back for all 4 of them combined, not each one. And then have a pepper mill. I actually get like special peppercorns from India, which have quite a bit more flavor to them. Unfortunately, they're a little bit too large for the grinder, so I have to grind forever. And you just cover them pretty well with pepper, like so. And then you pat it all in like that. Flip it over and do the same thing to the opposite side. That prepares it for the pan over here. Part of learning to cook is learning about your equipment. So I have a pretty good idea about how high I need to turn on my pan for this, but it may take a little bit of trial and error. See, I'm sort of feeling above this to see when the pan is hot enough to put it on. I'm going to put just a little dab of oil on there as that heats up. Properly working with meat like this is a lot about temperature. If you have the temperature too high or too low, the center of the meat is going to cook at about the same rate in both cases, but you're going to cook the outside a lot slower or a lot faster. So you want a good browning on the outside, but you don't want to burn it. If you turn the temperature too high, you're going to burn it on the outside and it's not even going to be cooked in the inside. And if you have it too low, then you're never going to get that sear and it's going to be overdone on the inside. So it takes a little bit of trial and error. Start with err on the side of too low, because something that's a little bit overdone you can still eat just fine, whereas if it's burned, then you can't really. So it looks like this is getting about to where we need it. So I'm just going to pick these up, put them in there, like so. And now it's going to take about 4 minutes per side. And that's going to be about the same no matter the temperature, so I can actually kind of like get a smell off of this, and if it's already starting to smell done after just a minute or so, then I know I have the temperature too high and I'd have to adjust it. Alright, well those 2 are going. Let's take a look at the other ones that I already have done here, and I'll show you what I do to finish them off. Since these are going into a stew, I want to cut it up into little pieces so that it's not just a whole piece of pork in there. Now these are bone in, so I'm having to carve around this little T-bone like thing in there. I want to be careful with that, and again, having a sharp, high quality knife helps quite a bit with this sort of thing. So you just cut most of the meat off of it like that. And then you have a little bone that you can get rid of. Do that to both of them. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to find where the downward part of the T-bone is. There we go. You can see it's pretty well done, but I've left a little bit of pinkness in there simply because I trust the quality of this meat quite a bit. And then I'm just going to take this and cut it crossways like this into strips. And then I'm going to cut it into thin pieces here. This just sort of makes all little thin slivers of pork that you're going to get in a stew. So it's not like you're ever getting a big piece of pork in there. It all just sort of melts together with all the other vegetables. If there's large pieces of fat like this, you might want to get rid of that. That's not the most pleasant thing to run into. It's a little ironic because in our society, vegetables have the reputation for being a lot more work because you need to cook and clean, or you need to cut them all up and clean them and do all these other things to them. But when you think about it, if we didn't have butcher shops, meat would be even more work. Here it came in this little hermetically sealed package, already all cut up, all skinned, all butchered. If I were starting out from a whole pig outside, it would be a lot more work than what this is here. It smells like this. These things are ready to be flipped. Yep, perfect. So really the whole perspective where we're eating a lot more meat and it's a lot easier to eat meat than vegetables is just a product of the way that we've structured things in our food system. Now the standard practice in America is to cook all pork until it's well done in order to avoid risk of trichinosis, which is kind of a nasty a nasty parasite that pigs sometimes have, and it can survive fairly high temperatures. But since I really trust the source of this meat, I'm letting it be more like a medium, maybe slightly medium well preparation. But if you get your pork from a source that you don't trust explicitly, you want to make sure that's well done, and you're probably going to want to use a thermometer, at least until you get really good at judging where meat is at by looking at it. Going to throw in all that that pork chop that we did. The finished apples that we made before are going to go in there, and I already have the fire off, so everything is already all done, and it's all just sort of cooling there. So we're not going to like recook any of these things. And then there's one final thing that goes in there. I'm going to put in maybe a tablespoon or two of apple cider vinegar. That helps to really bring the apple and the pork flavors together, and adds a little bit of sourness to balance out the sweetness and the savoriness of the dish already. This isn't a very good apple cider vinegar. When I last ran out, I went to a store where they didn't have one that had the the sediment and the active probiotic culture still in it, but it'll work just fine for the flavor principle. So just add like maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons of that. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to make it too sour. So under pour at first, mix it in, taste it until you just start to get a little bit of that sourness out of there. And we're just going to turn the heat back on to bring it back up to a boil, because the vegetables have actually been done for a little while there. You just sort of check to see when the carrots are kind of the last thing to go. When they're quite soft, then you can just turn the heat off and wait for everything else to come back together. You see the apple and the pork and all the carrots and everything in there. Stir that up a bit. That's actually going to crush the squash, which is really soft at this point, and just make everything a little bit more thick and rich. And we'll bring that back up to a simmer and make sure there's enough vinegar, enough salt, and then it will be done. All right, after all is said and done, you can see that the entire kitchen is still pretty neat. We've got a plate there that we use to store stuff on. Got the 2 pans and like this many utensils, and that is about it. I just kind of reused everything over and over again, so it's pretty minimal cleanup at the end of it. All right, here we are at the end of it all. Stew is done. It took me maybe about 2 hours, and probably would have taken quite a bit less if I wasn't having to be a cameraman and handle the microphones at the same time as I was trying to cook. And I got a pretty big pot of stew. It probably represents something like 6 meals worth, so you get quite a bit out of it. And you could easily double or triple it if you so wanted, and that would be a little bit more work, but not a lot. And I don't know how well it would freeze, so I don't know how large you want to make it, but it's simply fantastic just as it is right now, like this. Yeah, just like so. See the carrot and the pork belly right there, and the apple. The onion, it's all just coming together right in there. It's still steaming right here. It was almost a little bit too hot to eat. But the whole thing is incredibly savory, very tasty, just a little bit of spice on it, and a little bit of sweetness and sourness to balance it all out. It's just fantastic. And again, I didn't base this on any recipe. I simply made it up from things that I found around the house. So you're not going to be able to do this if you're just starting out in the kitchen or if you're not too experienced with it. But once you get the basics down, you can usually find some way to make the ingredients you have work. And so if you join like a CSA where you just get a bunch of vegetables every week, or if you just get a bunch of stuff from what's in season at the farmer's market, you can find something delicious to do with it once you learn the basic tricks of how to do that. So for those of you who are experienced in the kitchen, I hope I didn't bore you with the demonstrations about how to cut an onion or how to sear a piece of meat or something like that. For those of you who aren't as experienced, I hope you got something out of that. And I hope the people who are a bit more experienced at least got an excellent fall stew recipe out of the deal. I'm going to post it down below with the ingredients and stuff like that. It's going to be a pretty long video description, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Hope you all enjoyed this. I plan on making more videos like this. I have a few more in the hopper. I have a few videos of me training for a Spartan race this past summer that I sat on for probably a little bit too long, but those are going to be coming out soon. So I apologize to anybody who I promised those videos. They are coming. It just has been a little bit of a longer process of editing than I first anticipated. And I'm going to have a few more videos where I go out to places where vegetables are grown, show you how that whole process works. It's going to be a good time. So thanks so much for watching, and Godspeed.